Welcome back to Winnipeg Sports Talk. My name is Hrabchak. Today's episode is part 2 of my Winnipeg Jets Trade Deadline Target series. I released part 1 last week. You guys loved it. Tons of great comments on some names that I should cover in today's episode, and that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to analyze the pros and cons of some of the popular names on trade boards across the league, whether or not they would fit with the Winnipeg Jets, and whether or not the Jets should target them ahead of the March 7th trade deadline. So without further ado, let's dive right into it, starting with my first target in part 2 of this series. The first player I want to cover in today's episode is number 1 on almost every single trade board out there, and that is New York Islanders center Brock Nelson. He's a 6'4", 212-pound left shot center, 33 years old, and he has scored 30 or more goals in the 3 seasons prior to this one, where he has 17 goals, 18 assists, and 35 points through 55 games this season. Now, one of the reasons I didn't include him in part 1 was because there were some rumors circulating that the Islanders were actually looking to extend him and not trade him, but Nelson still remains atop every single trade board out there, so I'm going to talk about him in today's episode, where I think he would be a great fit for the Jets as a rental. He's got just this year left on his contract, but he would slide right in on that second line alongside Nikolai Ehlers and Cole Perfetti. And as a 6'4", 212-pound center, he's big, he's mobile, he's on Team USA at the Four Nations Faceoff, and he scores a ton of goals. I think he would be a great fit as a rental, and maybe the Jets could look to extend him a couple years after this one as well, making that acquisition price worth it, not just for this season, but for the coming years as well. Brock Nelson, one of the highest rated targets on every single trade board, would be a great fit for the Winnipeg Jets. One last note on Brock Nelson. Frank Saravalli of Daily Faceoff just recently released an article throwing out some hypothetical trade packages for these high-profile trade targets, and actually threw one out there for the Winnipeg Jets to acquire Brock Nelson. The package was a first-round pick, a third-round pick, and Jets center Rasmus Kupari. So let me know in the comments down below if you would do that trade for Brock Nelson to join the Winnipeg Jets for the stretch run and into the playoffs as a rental center, a proven goal scorer, 35 points so far this season. Let me know in the comments down below if you would make that trade. The next player I want to cover in today's episode is Nashville Predators forward Ryan O'Reilly. He was one of the most commented players in part 1 of this series, so I had to cover him in today's episode. And there are definitely pros and cons to a Ryan O'Reilly acquisition for the Winnipeg Jets. Let's start with the pros. He's a known playoff performer. He's won a Stanley Cup in 2018-19 with the St. Louis Blues, and at 34 years old is still an effective player. 34 points this year in 51 games, 6'1", 216 pounds. Like I said, a known playoff performer, and would fit in on that second line, not only for this year, but for 2 years after this one at $4.5 million per season, which is an incredibly affordable cap hit for the Winnipeg Jets. So his contract fits the window. He's a known playoff performer, a proven winner, and thrives in a playoff atmosphere. Now for the cons, and I think it has to do solely with Ryan O'Reilly's play style. Not to say he can't be effective as a Winnipeg Jet, but I wonder about the foot speed discrepancy between him and Nikolai Ehlers, because Ryan O'Reilly would slot right into that second line. We know Nikolai Ehlers is a burner. He's one of the fastest players in the NHL, and Ryan O'Reilly has foot speed concerns. So would those two play styles mesh with one another? If the Winnipeg Jets pro scouting staff believes that they would, I think Ryan O'Reilly would be a perfect addition for the Winnipeg Jets. If not, a potential acquisition of O'Reilly could backfire, because if those play styles don't mesh, all your offense is coming from your top line and your power play, which has bailed the Jets out at times this year, but you need a strong second line in the playoffs. So if those two play styles wouldn't mesh, it might not work, but there are a lot of pros for Ryan O'Reilly as well. The next name I want to cover in today's episode is Boston Bruins right shot defenseman Brandon Carlo. Now, it has to be mentioned that he has a 10-team no-trade list and term left on his contract. He's got this year and 2 more at $4.1 million per season, and the Boston Bruins very well could be in a playoff spot by the time the March 7th trade deadline rolls around. But as they start to slide in the standings, Carlo's name is starting to pop up on trade boards, and if they slide further, he is a name to watch for the Winnipeg Jets. He would fill a depth, penalty-killing, big right shot defenseman role that they seem to be eyeing ahead of the trade deadline. They've had sort of a revolving door in that position this year. Colin Miller's been there, Ville Heinola been on his offside, Logan Stanley's been on the third pair. Carlo would bring stability to that third pairing, be a viable penalty killer for the Winnipeg Jets, And much like Ryan O'Reilly, not just a rental, not just this year under contract, but the next two as well, fitting the window of these prime years where they have Josh Morrissey, Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and Connor Hellebuck under contract at great price tags. So Brandon Carlo would be a player for the Jets not only this year, but for the next 2 years as well. So Brandon Carlo, a 6'5", 216-pound right shot defenseman, 28 years old, a name to watch for if the Boston Bruins start to slide out of the playoffs that the Winnipeg Jets could be interested in. Before we dive into the final 2 trade targets of today's episode, make sure you've hit the like button on the video. Also hit that subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss all the great Winnipeg Jets content that we will have for you over the final 26 games of the regular season and into the playoffs, with trade deadline coverage as well. So we've got tons of content coming out over the next couple of months. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of it. Hit the like button on this video, and let's get into the final 2 trade targets for the Winnipeg Jets. The next name I want to mention on today's episode is Anaheim Ducks left shot defenseman Brian Dumoulin. Now, a lot of the talking points are going to be similar for Brandon Carlo. There's some instability on that Jets third pair. I believe they're looking to refine that spot in their lineup through the trade deadline, and Brian Dumoulin could be the player to do just that. He's a 6'4", 214-pound left shot defenseman who kills penalties, is physical, and would bring that skill set to the Jets third pair and add some stability there. He's a rental. He's got just this year left on his contract at $3 million, 33 years old, and he's won 2 Stanley Cups, both coming nearly 10 years ago in the back-to-back for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So he's got playoff experience. He's a veteran defenseman, a penalty killer, physical, and would be a valuable asset for the Winnipeg Jets through this playoff run, and would bring some stability, some much needed stability to that Winnipeg Jets third pairing, and would come at maybe a cheaper cost than some of the other defensemen on trade boards, as he's a rental. He's 33 years old. You're not paying for term. You're not paying for that high profile target. So Brian Dumoulin is a name to watch for the Winnipeg Jets ahead of the March 7th trade deadline. The final name I want to mention on today's episode is Seattle Kraken center Yanni Gourde. Now, he underwent sports hernia surgery at the end of January and was labeled as out for the next 5 to 7 weeks. So it's unlikely he even plays in a game between now and the March 7th trade deadline. Because of that, he has been sliding down trade boards, but he remains on them, just not near the top where he was when the trade board started coming out around the Brock Nelsons of the world as a player who was very likely to be moved. Now potential buyers are maybe scared off by the fact that he won't play from this injury before the trade deadline. But if he's still being shopped by the Kraken and the Jets are still interested, he could be a solid bottom 6 center option. He's a 5'9", 172-pound center, 16 points in 35 games so far this season, and plays way bigger than his size. He's won 2 Stanley Cups in his career, both with the Tampa Bay Lightning when they went back-to-back, was a key part in their bottom 6 of those years, and at 33 years old, has that playoff experience, would bring some offensive pop and some playoff intensity to the bottom 6 that the Winnipeg Jets could be looking for. The main question with him is health and whether or not he plays a game heading into the trade deadline or shortly thereafter if the Winnipeg Jets were to acquire him. So Yanni Gourde, health the main concern, but could be an option for the Winnipeg Jets. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button down below. While you're down there, drop a comment on which player you would most like to see in a Winnipeg Jets uniform through the March 7th trade deadline. Hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss all the great content we've got coming for you here on this channel going forward. I am very eager to see what the Winnipeg Jets do at this year's trade deadline for what could hopefully be a very long playoff run, and I'm sure you all are as well. Thank you for watching, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.